The
I
slap
told you to
came out
make
of
this
nowhere.
hours ago.
Chisom's
Now
head
look,
snapped
you've
to the
spilled
side, her
everything.
cheek
You are
burning like fire
completely
as she stumbled
useless.
backward
I'm
into the
sorry,
kitchen
Ma, it
wall.
just fell.
The pot of jollof rice she'd been stirring crashed to the floor, sending grains scattering across the tiles like red confetti. "Are you deaf?" Uncle Tony's wife, Auntie Bessie, towered over her, her wrapper tied high on her chest, her eyes blazing with fury. "I said I wanted that food ready by 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. What time is it now?" Chisom's trembling hands found the wall behind her for support. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Auntie, I'm sorry. I was washing." Another slap, harder this time. "Shut up. Shut your useless mouth. 4 years in this house and you still can't do anything right." From the living room, the sound of the television continued uninterrupted. Uncle Tony sat there, Chisom knew, probably watching the evening news, probably pretending he couldn't hear what was happening just 30 feet away. He always pretended. Chisom sank to her knees, her hands moving automatically to gather the ruined rice, her tears streaming down her face, but her mouth pressed tight. She'd learned long ago that crying out loud only made things worse. 4 years. 4 years of this. She was supposed to be in school by now. She was supposed to be wearing a uniform, carrying textbooks, dreaming of becoming a nurse like her late mother. Instead, she was here on her knees, picking rice off a dirty kitchen floor, her hands rough and cracked, her dreams as scattered as the grains before her. How did it come to this? The answer to that question began 4 years earlier, in a small village called Umeeke in Imo State, on the day Chisom's entire world collapsed. Chisom was 13 years old when death came for her mother. It happened on a Wednesday, the kind of ordinary Wednesday that gave no warning of the tragedy it carried. Mama had been coughing for weeks, but she'd dismissed it, blamed it on the harmattan dust, promised she'd see the chemist when they had money. They never had money. That morning, Mama had held Chisom's face in her hands, her grip weaker than usual, her eyes carrying a strange light that Chisom wouldn't understand until much later. My daughter, Mama had said, her voice thin as paper. You are special. Do you hear me? You are going to be somebody important one day. Promise me you will finish your school. Promise me. Chisom smiled, had rolled her eyes the way teenagers do when their mothers say things that seem unnecessary. Mama, stop talking like that. You're being dramatic. Promise me, Chisom. I promise, Mama. I promise. Mama had smiled then, had released Chisom's face and leaned back on her mat. Good. Now go to school. Don't be late. Those were the last words her mother ever spoke to her daughter. By the time Chisom returned from school that afternoon, her mother was cold. A neighbor had found her, had raised the alarm, had called for help that came too late. The entire village knew before Chisom did. She'd walked into a compound full of wailing women, and she knew it immediately, had felt it in her bones before anyone spoke. Her scream had echoed across the village, a sound of pure anguish that made even the strongest men look away. The days that followed were a blur of tears and burial preparations, and relatives who materialized from nowhere, people Chisom had never seen before, all claiming to be family. They'd buried Mama in the village cemetery, wrapped in white cloth, lowered in red earth that seemed too cruel, too final. And then came the question that would determine Chisom's fate. What to do with the girl?
Chisom had no father, or at least no father who'd ever claimed her. Mama had never spoken of him, had raised Chisom alone, had worked as a trader selling provisions in the local market. There was no family house, no inheritance, no money. There was only a 13-year-old orphan and a community that had its own problems, its own children to feed, its own struggles to survive. That's when Uncle Tony appeared. He arrived 3 days after the burial in a Toyota Camry that gleamed in the village sun like something from another world. He wore a suit despite the heat, carried a briefcase like a man of importance, and spoke with the kind of Lagos accent that made village people feel small. Tony was Mama's younger brother, though he'd been absent from her life for over a decade. He'd left the village at 18, had gone to Lagos to seek his fortune, had found it, apparently, and had never looked back. He hadn't come for his sister's wedding. He hadn't come for Chisom's naming ceremony. He hadn't sent money when Mama was struggling to pay school fees. But he came for the burial, and he came with an offer. The family meeting was held in the village square under the old Udara tree where such decisions had been made for generations. The elders sat on wooden stools, their faces grave, their authority unquestionable. The women of the family gathered behind them, watching, whispering. Chisom sat alone on a mat in the centre, feeling like an item being auctioned. "Brothers and sisters," Uncle Tony began, his voice rich and confident. "I know I have been away for too long. I know I was not there when my dear sister needed me. This is my greatest regret." He paused for effect, and Chisom watched him through eyes still swollen from crying. There was something about him that felt rehearsed, performed, like an actor hitting his marks. "But I am here now, and I want to make things right. I want to take responsibility for my sister's child. I want to give her the life her mother dreamed for her." A murmur went through the gathering. The elders exchanged glances. One of them, Papa Eze, the oldest man in the village, leaned forward on his walking stick. "What exactly are you proposing, Tony?" Uncle Tony smiled, that Lagos smile full of white teeth and promise. "My dear child," he said, moving towards her, placing a hand on her head that felt more like possession than affection. "I understand. You've just lost your mother. Everything is confusing. But think about it. What future do you have here? Who will pay your school fees? Who will feed you?" He gestured around at the village, at the mud houses and dusty paths, at the reality of rural poverty that everyone knew but no one wanted to admit. "With me, you will have everything. Good food, good clothes, good education. You will make your mother proud." He invoked Mama, and Chisom felt her resistance crumble. Wasn't this what Mama wanted? Didn't Mama make her promise to finish her school? And here was a way, maybe the only way, to keep that promise. The elders conferred briefly. Then Papa Eze spoke. "Tony, you are doing a good thing. But remember, this child is not just your responsibility. She is the responsibility of this entire village. If anything happens to her, if she is mistreated in any way, we will hold you accountable. The gods will hold you accountable." Tony's smile never wavered. "Papa, I give you my word. Chisom will be treated like a princess." And so it was decided. Within a week, Chisom packed her few belongings, 2 dresses, her school notebooks, a photograph of her mother, into a small bag and climbed into Uncle Tony's shiny Camry. As the car pulled away from the village, Chisom turned to watch everything she'd ever known disappear in a cloud of dust. The children she'd grown up with waved goodbye. The women called out blessings. The old men nodded with something like approval. Nobody waved back to them in the car. Uncle Tony was already on his phone, speaking rapid English about something called quarterly reports and market projections.
He'd barely acknowledged Chisom since she got in the car. The journey to Lagos took 6 hours, and in that time Uncle Tony spoke to Chisom exactly 3 times, once to ask if she needed to use the toilet, once to hand her a bottle of water, and once to tell her that Auntie Bissy was particular about certain things and that Chisom would need to learn quickly. Chisom didn't understand what he meant. She would soon learn. The house in Lagos was bigger than anything Chisom had ever seen. It was located in an estate called Lekki, surrounded by other big houses with high fences and security guards. Uncle Tony's house had 2 floors, a generator that hummed constantly, and a compound with actual tiles on the ground instead of dirt. Chisom's heart lifted when she saw it. Surely in a house like this there would be room for her. Surely she would be comfortable here. Surely everything would be okay. Auntie Bissy was waiting at the door.
She was a tall woman, light-skinned in the way that suggested bleaching creams, with long braids that fell past her shoulders and nails painted the colour of blood. She wore a wrapper that probably cost more than everything Chisom owned combined, and she looked at Chisom the way someone might look at a stain on their new carpet. "So this is the one?" Auntie Bissy said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, my dear," Uncle Tony said, suddenly smaller somehow, his Lagos confidence shrinking in the presence of his wife. "This is Chisom, my sister's daughter." Auntie Bissy circled Chisom slowly, examining her from every angle. Chisom stood still, clutching her small bag, feeling like livestock at a market. "She's thin," Auntie Bissy observed, "and look at her skin, so dark. Well, I suppose she can't help that." Chisom felt her face flush with shame, though she didn't understand why she should be ashamed of her own skin. "Where will she sleep?" Auntie Bissy asked her husband. "I thought maybe the spare room, the small one near the kitchen." Auntie Bissy's laugh was sharp and cold. "The spare room? That's for guests, not for this. No, she'll sleep in the boys' quarters with the other helps." Chisom's heart sank. Other helps? She wasn't supposed to be a help. She was supposed to be family. "My dear," Uncle Tony began, but his wife's look silenced him immediately. "Don't my dear me, Tony. You brought this responsibility into our home without properly consulting me. The least you can do is let me handle the arrangements. Now take her bags to the BQ. I'll tell Joy to show her around tomorrow." Uncle Tony hesitated, and for a moment, just a moment, Chisom thought he might stand up for her, might remind his wife that he'd promised to treat Chisom like his own daughter. He didn't. "Yes, my dear," he said quietly, and led Chisom around the back of the house to a small building that housed the generator and a single room barely bigger than a closet. "This is temporary," he told her, not meeting his eyes. "Just until Auntie Bissy gets used to you being here. Once school starts, everything will be better." "When does school start, Uncle?" Chisom asked. "Soon, very soon. Don't worry about anything. Just rest tonight. We'll sort everything out tomorrow." He left her there in that small, hot room with a mattress on the floor and a single window that didn't fully close. Chisom lay awake all night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Lagos, trying to convince herself that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow was worse. She was woken at 5 a.m. by Joy, the house help who'd been working for the family for 2 years. Joy was a young woman in her 20s with rough hands and tired eyes, and she delivered the news with the casual brutality of someone who'd seen it all before. "Auntie says you should come and start work. There's water to fetch, clothes to wash, and breakfast to prepare." "Work?" Chisom sat up, confused. But Uncle said I would be going to school. School, sister? Forget about school. You're the new house help. That's why they brought you here. They've been looking for someone since Grace ran away last month. That's not true. Uncle Tony promised. I'm sure he did. They all promise. Now get up before Auntie comes and meets you still sleeping. Trust me, you don't want that. Chisom learned the rhythm of the house quickly. She had no choice.
Wake up at 5 a.m. Fetch water from the tank outside. Sweep and mop the entire house, both floors. Make breakfast for Uncle, Auntie, and their 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, all younger than Chisom, all attending expensive private schools while she cleaned their rooms. After breakfast, there was laundry, not machine laundry. No, the washing machine was only for good clothes. Chisom hand-washed everything else, scrubbing until her knuckles bled, until her back ached from bending over the basin. Then lunch preparation, then picking up the children from school, then afternoon cleaning, then dinner preparation, then evening cleanup, then, if she was lucky, a few hours of sleep before it all began again. The first time Chisom tried to speak to Uncle Tony about school, he was reading a newspaper in the living room, acting as if the previous day's promises had never been made. "Uncle Tony, when will I start school?" He didn't look up. "We're still arranging things. The term has already started, so you'll have to wait for the next one." "But, Uncle—" "Chisom," his voice was sharp now, warning. "I said we're arranging things. Go and help your auntie in the kitchen. We'll discuss this later." Later never came. The next term there was another excuse. They were still looking for a good school. Then the school fees were too expensive. Then maybe she should wait until the following year. Then maybe she should just be grateful for the roof over her head. Month after month, excuse after excuse, until Chisom realized the truth that Joy had told her on her very first day. There was never going to be any school. There had never been a plan to send her to school. Uncle Tony had taken her from the village for one reason and one reason only: free labor. The realization broke something inside Chisom. She cried for 3 nights straight, muffling her sobs in her thin pillow so no one would hear. She thought about running away, but where would she go? She had no money, no phone, no way to contact anyone in the village. She didn't even know the address of the house where she lived. And so she stayed, and she worked, and she tried to survive. Year 1 became Year 2. Year 2 became Year 3. Year 3 became Year 4. Chisom grew from a hopeful 13-year-old into a hardened 17-year-old. Her dreams calcified into something she barely remembered having. Her hands, once soft with childhood, became rough as leather. Her back developed a permanent ache. Her eyes, once bright with ambition, dulled into the flat stare of survival. The children of the house grew too. Tunde, the oldest boy, was 16 now, almost Chisom's age, and he'd begun to look at her in ways that made her skin crawl. His younger brother Segun found entertainment in ordering her around, in reminding her that she was just a maid and that she should know her place. Even little Sade, the only girl, had learned to snap her fingers at Chisom like she was a dog. But Auntie Bissy remained the worst of all. The woman seemed to derive genuine pleasure from Chisom's suffering. She would find fault with everything: rice too salty, rice not salty enough, floor not clean enough, floor too wet, clothes not folded right, clothes folded too tight. Every mistake, real or imagined, earned Chisom a punishment. Sometimes it was a slap, sometimes it was denial of food, sometimes it was worse.
One evening, when Chisom accidentally broke a glass while washing dishes, Auntie Bissy made her kneel on the tiles for 3 hours straight, her knees grinding against the hard surface until they bled. Uncle Tony walked past twice during those 3 hours. He said nothing either time. But it was the incident with the soup that Chisom would never forget. It happened in her 3rd year, during a dinner party Uncle Tony was hosting for his business associates. Chisom had been cooking all day under Auntie Bissy's relentless supervision, preparing jollof rice, fried rice, egusi soup, and grilled fish. The table was set with the good china, the house was spotless, and everything was perfect.
Or so Chisom thought. As she served the egusi soup to one of the guests, a drop splashed onto the white tablecloth. Just one drop. The guest didn't even notice, but Auntie Bissy, watching from across the room with hawk eyes, noticed. She waited until the guests left, then she summoned Chisom to the kitchen. "You embarrassed me," Auntie Bissy said, her voice terrifyingly calm. "In my own house." "Auntie, it was just one drop. I'm sorry." "Sorry?" Auntie Bissy picked up the pot of leftover soup from the stove. It had cooled, but it was still warm. "Sorry?" Before Chisom could react, Auntie Bissy poured the entire pot of soup over her head. Chisom screamed as the warm, oily liquid drenched her hair, ran down her face, soaked into her clothes. She could taste it in her mouth, feel it seeping into her ears, burning her eyes. "Now you have something to really be sorry about," Auntie Bissy said. "Clean yourself up, and clean this floor too. I want it spotless before you sleep." Chisom cleaned the floor that night, soup still dripping from her body, silent tears mixing with the oil on her face. She didn't sleep. She sat in her small room in the BQ, staring at the wall, wondering if this was how her life would end. By the 4th year, Chisom had become a ghost. She moved through the house silently, speaking only when she was spoken to, eating whatever scraps were left over, sleeping whenever she was allowed. She'd stopped dreaming of school, stopped dreaming of becoming a nurse, stopped dreaming of anything at all. Survival was its own full-time occupation. But the universe had not forgotten Chisom. Change came in the form of a new driver named Samuel. Samuel was hired to replace the previous driver, who had quit after a disagreement with Auntie Bissy. He was a man in his 40s with grey at his temples and kindness in his eyes, and from his very first day he noticed things. He noticed how Chisom was always working while the children of the house played. He noticed how thin she looked, how tired she looked, how she flinched whenever Auntie Bissy raised her voice. He noticed the bruises she tried to hide, the sadness she couldn't. One evening, while Chisom was hanging laundry behind the house, Samuel approached her. "Sister, can I ask you something?" Chisom froze. She'd learned to be wary of everyone in this house. "Yes?" "How did you come to be here, and where are your parents?" The question was so simple, so human, so concerned, that something cracked inside her. When was the last time anyone had asked about her? When was the last time anyone had cared? Before she could stop herself, the story poured out. Her mother's death, Uncle Tony's promise, the 4 years of servitude that followed, the beatings, the humiliation, the stolen childhood. Samuel listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each revelation. "This is wrong," he said when she finished. "This is very wrong. Do you have any family in the village? Anyone who could help?" Chisom shook her head. "Even if I did, how would I reach them? I have no phone, no money. I don't even know this address properly." Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I have a daughter. She's about your age. If someone was doing this to her—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Give me some time. Let me think of something." "Please," Chisom whispered, "please don't tell anyone. If Auntie finds out I talked to you." "I understand. I'll be careful. Just hold on a little longer, okay? Help is coming."
Chisom wanted to believe him. She'd stopped believing in promises long ago, but something about Samuel felt different. Something about the way he looked at her, with genuine concern instead of ownership or contempt, made her want to hope again. 2 weeks later, Samuel came to her with a phone. "Take this," he said, pressing the small Nokia into her hands. "I've already put credit on it. There's only one number saved. It's for a woman named Mrs. Nkechi. She runs an organization that helps children like you. I told her about your situation. She wants to help." Chisom stared at the phone like it was made of gold. "I can't take this. If they find it—" "Hide it well, and call her tonight when everyone is asleep. Tell her everything. She'll know what to do." That night, at 2 a.m., Chisom crept into the bathroom with the phone pressed against her chest. She dialed the number with trembling fingers. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was warm, maternal. Is this Mrs. Nkechi?" "Yes, my dear. Samuel told you about you. You must be Chisom." And for the second time in 2 weeks, Chisom told her story. But this time she told it to someone who could actually do something about it. Mrs. Nkechi worked for an NGO called Children's Rights Initiative, an organization that specialized in rescuing children from domestic servitude and abuse. She explained to Chisom that what had been done to her was not just wrong, it was illegal. Child labor, denial of education, physical abuse, these were crimes, no matter what family relationship existed between the abuser and the victim. "We're going to get you out there," Mrs. Nkechi promised, "but we need to be careful. We need evidence, and we need to make sure you're safe when we make our move. Can you be strong for just a little longer?" "I've been strong for 4 years," said Chisom. "I can be strong for a little more." Over the following month, Chisom secretly documented everything. With Samuel's help, she took photos of her injuries after beatings. She recorded audio on the phone when Auntie Disi screamed at her or hit her. She kept a written diary of every day's abuses hidden in a corner of the BQ that no one ever checked. Meanwhile, Mrs. Nkechi was building a case. She contacted the village where Chisom came from, found the elders who witnessed Uncle Tony's promise, got their statements. She reached out to child protection services, to the police, to journalists who covered stories of child exploitation. The trap was being set. D-Day came on a Thursday afternoon. Auntie Bisi was hosting a women's meeting in the living room, showing off her wealth and status to her society friends when they heard a knock at the gate. Through the window, Chisom saw something that made her heart leap. 3 police cars, a van marked Child Protection Services, several people in official-looking uniforms, and Mrs. Nkechi standing at the front, looking like justice personified. "What is this?" Auntie Bisi demanded, rushing to the gate. "What's happening here?" "Mrs. Bisi Okafa." "Yes, what do you want?" "We have a warrant to search these premises regarding allegations of child labor, child abuse, and violation of the Child Rights Act. Please step aside." Everything that followed was chaos. Auntie Bisi screamed about harassment, about false accusations, about how she would sue everyone involved. Uncle Tony rushed home from work, his face pale, his confidence finally crumbled.
"This is a misunderstanding," he kept saying, but no one was listening. Mrs. Nkechi found Chisom in the kitchen, exactly where she'd been told she would be. She wrapped her arms around the girl, this stranger who had become her lifeline. "It's over," she whispered. "You're safe now." Chisom couldn't speak. She just cried, deep, racking sobs that released 4 years of pain, 4 years of silence, 4 years of stolen childhood. The evidence Chisom had collected was damning.
The photos of her injuries, the audio recordings of abuse, the testimony of Samuel, the statements from the village elders, the contrast between her condition and the well-fed, well-educated children of the house. Uncle Tony and Auntie Bessie were arrested that same day. They were charged with child trafficking, child labor, assault, and multiple violations of the Child Rights Act. Their assets were frozen, their children were temporarily placed with relatives, their society friends scattered like roaches in light. The case made national news. Lagos couple arrested for enslaving niece for 4 years, the headlines read. Uncle's promise of education became prison of abuse. How a house help and an NGO saved a teenage girl from modern slavery. Chisoma's story touched thousands of hearts across Nigeria. Messages of support poured in. Donations flooded the NGO that rescued her. Other victims, inspired by her courage, began to speak out about their own experiences. But for Chisom, the most important thing was simpler. She was going back to school. The NGO enrolled her in a boarding school in the eastern region, not far from her home village. She was 17, years behind her age mates, but she didn't care. She finally had what had been stolen from her. On her first day of school, she stood in front of the mirror in her new uniform, the uniform she'd dreamed about for 4 years, and she allowed herself to smile. I promised you, Mama. I promised I would finish my school, and I'm going to keep that promise. The trial of Uncle Tony and Auntie Bessie took 8 months. Chisom testified twice, standing in court and facing the people who had made her life hell, her voice steady even when her heart raced. She told the court everything, every slap, every humiliation, every stolen year, every broken promise. When she was done, even the judge had tears in his eyes. Uncle Tony was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Auntie Bessie got 8. They would both serve as examples of what happens when adults betray the children entrusted to their care. Outside the courthouse, journalists crowded around Chisom, asking how she felt. I feel free, she said simply, and I feel grateful. To Samuel, who risked his job to help me, to Mrs. Nkechi, who believed me, to everyone who didn't look away. She paused, looking directly into one of the cameras. And to every child out there who is going through what I went through, I want you to know this. You are not alone. You are not worthless. What is happening to you is not normal, and it is not your fault. Keep speaking. Keep fighting. Help will come. It may take time, but it will come. Chisom is 21 years old now. She completed her secondary education at the top of her class, despite starting years behind. She won a scholarship to study nursing at a university in Lagos, the same city that had been her prison, but would now become her launching pad. She visits her mother's grave every year, bringing flowers and updates on her life. She tells Mama about her grades, about her friends, about her plans to build a clinic in their village one day. She tells Mama that she kept her promise.
Samuel, the driver who started everything, is the godfather to her future children, she's already decided. Mrs. Nkechi is her second mother. The village elders welcomed her home as a hero. Uncle Tony wrote her a letter from prison once, full of apologies and explanations. She read it, then she burned it. Some things don't deserve forgiveness. Some things just deserve moving on. But Chisom didn't just move on. She moved forward with purpose. She now volunteers with the same NGO that rescued her, helping to identify and save other children trapped in domestic servitude. She gives talks in schools and churches about the signs of child abuse, about the importance of speaking up, about the power of not looking away.
My uncle promised me school, she tells audiences, and he made me his maid for 4 years. But that's not the end of my story. That's just the obstacle I had to climb to reach my destiny, and I'm still climbing. Every day, every step, getting closer to the person my mother always knew I could be. The story of Chisom is not unique. Across Nigeria, across Africa, across the world, there are millions of children just like her. Promised education, given servitude. Promised family, given exploitation. Promised love, given pain. But her story is also not without hope. Because for every Uncle Tony who breaks his promise, there can be a Samuel who keeps his. For every Auntie Bisi who raises her hand in violence, there can be a Mrs. Nkechi who extends hers in rescue. For every system that fails a child, there can be voices that refuse to be silent. The difference between tragedy and triumph is often just one person who cares enough to act. One person who says, "This is not right." One person who says, "Let me help." One person who says, "I see you, I believe you, you matter." Today, Chisom is that person for countless others. The girl who was once invisible in a kitchen in Lekki now stands tall as a beacon of hope for children who feel unseen. The hands that once scrubbed floors now hold the hands of children being rescued from similar fates. The voice that was once silenced now speaks loudly for those who cannot speak for themselves. This is what happens when pain becomes purpose. This is what happens when surviving becomes thriving. This is what happens when a promise that was broken becomes a promise that is kept. Mama, wherever you are, your daughter wants you to know. She finished her school. She became somebody important. She kept her promise. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you feel something, please let us know in the comments below. Share your thoughts. Share your own experiences if you have them. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose life might be changed by this story. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. We share stories like Chisom's every week, stories that inspire, stories that challenge, stories that matter. And please give this video a like. It helps us reach more people who need to hear these messages, who need to know that they're not alone. Remember, the difference between tragedy and triumph is often just one person. Be that person. Until next time.